It's been awfully funny watching the reaction from fans of the Legacy 8 programs of the Big 12 talking about why they're happy about Oklahoma and Texas leaving the Big 12. Because, truth be told, the reasoning isn't really the right reasons. You ought to be happy that the deal that Commissioner Yormark struck allows those schools to become more whole and get a little bit more money out of Oklahoma as they leave, and Texas. Had they have stayed around for another year, then they just walk away and it doesn't cost them anything and they go get paid. It was smart on Yormark's part. And the other reason that it was smart on Yormark's part was because now he can focus on finding a way to make this conference relevant once they walk. And that's what's most important here. If he had to stay tied up in these little negotiations on whether or not to let Oklahoma and Texas walk out after this season, then he wouldn't have been able to focus on what was really important, which is killing the Pac 12 in hopes of keeping the Big 12 conference relevant for a little while longer.
Let's go!
Welcome back to the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Watkins, and if you love college football, you're definitely in the right place. So before you forget, smash that red subscriber button, like our videos, and don't forget to ring the bell so you don't miss one moment of the Hall of Fame College Football Podcast. Well, big news from yesterday, as we talked about last night on the live show. Oklahoma and Texas are leaving the Big 12 Conference after the 2023 season to become members of the SEC. Finally, a deal was struck that made everybody, I guess, somewhat happy to see them go. There is a lot of pettiness continuing to be spewed from the Legacy 8 members of the conference, and probably back and forth from some of the members of the fan base of Oklahoma and Texas as well. What I would tell you is this: it's good for a lot of reasons. The main reason being, to me, is that while the Big 12 just lost its relevancy with Oklahoma and Texas leaving, there is a chance to regain it. And because of the fact that you have a guy in the commissioner's office that kind of knows what he's doing to make a deal and very well could pull off, well, what a year and a half ago would have been unthinkable when OU and Texas decided that they were leaving. With Bob Bowsby in charge, it was death to the conference. Now it looks like it's the Pac 12 that could die. And the fact that he got this negotiation out of the way, allowing Oklahoma and Texas to go ahead and part with the conference, means that he can focus on what is going to benefit the Big 12 in the future. Let's talk a little bit about all of that. Now, the details of the exit deal that we weren't quite sure about last night. I mean, it was something that they were kind of talking about and has been kind of spoken about as possible ways to make the deal go through. $100 million, which are not going to be paid, just out of money, out of the pockets of OU and Texas, but rather will be withheld from future earnings. So from obviously from the 2023 season, the share that would come from the television deal, the money shared there will be forfeited. That being said, also, as reported and as thought of before, it looks like about out of that 100 million, 20 million of that is going to go to Fox College Sports Network to kind of make them whole again. And on top of that, the Texas versus Michigan game that was set to be played, the first game of that series, they were going to play two games, was going to be in Austin, will now be flipped to Ann Arbor so that Fox will be able to obviously televise it and gain the profits from that game. Which, and honestly, that was a good deal for definitely for Oklahoma and Texas, but I think it's also a good deal for Fox as well. That was getting, it didn't look like that was going to work out all that well. Because and that's where you start worrying about whether or not the SEC and ESPN are going to like have a problem with that. That was just one of the a thing that it seemed like to me it was just another stumbling block. So to me, I think that was probably a smart move on the part of Texas and of Big 12 Commissioner Yormark as well. So that's basically it. So out of 100 million, you're going to have 80 million of that is going to go back to the Legacy 8 members of the Big 12 to make them whole in their investment to bring in the new four schools: Cincinnati, Houston, BYU, and UCF to the conference earlier than expected, so that you kind of saved the Big 12. Now, the other 20 million going to Fox, obviously, and then as I said, you will have a game that is going to switch from Austin to Ann Arbor, which will allow it to be televised by the Fox network, which will make them whole as well on their end of that final year. That if you had not done this, and this is the other thing, um, it, had this not been done, had you just continued to have this pettiness that was going back and forth between the Blue Bloods, Oklahoma and Texas, and your Legacy 8 members of no, make them stay, make them pay it all, make them do this, blah, 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 blah. Had this all continued and Oklahoma and Texas just stay until 2025, well, then they end up walking basically for free and they make money off of this deal. So they don't have to worry about making anybody whole. They would have played the Red River game on Fox in 2024. That would have taken care of Fox, right? That would have taken care of their obligation to Fox. Okay. On top of that, you would have still had the 99-year deal to work out, but maybe you get 30 million out of them each. So you definitely lose money. And even if you got 40 each and you get your 80, okay, fine. But you still essentially that's a wash because that 40 million was the money that they would have gotten for being in the conference at 2024. Now, the sentiment from the Legacy 8, which is kind of funny, I've seen some of the different stuff. Obviously the folks over at Oklahoma State, which I love to call Okie Light because they are light. You're not getting a whole lot of good talk out of there, and that's fine. I think for the most part, most of the schools around the Big 12 are just glad to have this over and behind them. My buddy Kuz over at Kuz's Corner, he's a West Virginia content creator, good guy, smart guy, and he obviously was talking about the fact of what I just said, that if you don't let them walk early and they don't have any kind of this payout, the 100 million, then you end up they walk for nothing. Essentially, it was a good deal. On top of that, he said, look, this would be a really bad look if Oklahoma or Texas represented the Big 12 in the CFP in 2024, which, if you remember right, the CFP will expand to 12 teams playing for the championship in 2024. Now, what I would tell you, he said you don't want a team that's leaving carrying the mantle for your conference for that first season going in. And I would agree with him there. And he even went further is, hey, had they, say Oklahoma and Texas play for the Big 12 championship that season, they could both end up in the CFP. Obviously until Texas does, like actually go in and show that their great recruiting classes matter, and wins a conference championship or plays for a conference championship, then it's right to question whether they could or not. What I would tell you is, if you think about it, something I've said in here before, in the 2023 recruiting class, Texas and Oklahoma combined for 34 blue chip recruits. 34. That's a 4 or 5-star recruit. All right. The rest of the conference, and we're talking all 12, including the new members, combined for 30 blue chip recruits. None of those, by the way, went to Okie Light. Okay. So chances are, and I would say this, I think that the chances are that Oklahoma or Texas wins the conference championship in 2023 and has a chance to play in the CFP are pretty good, just because of the fact that I just told you those blue chip recruit numbers. You can look back on the schedule if you want to, or look back on the records of Oklahoma and even Texas for that matter for this past year if you want to. What I would tell you is, if you don't think that was an anomaly, in view of the fact that, the previous years before that, Oklahoma had just won 6 in a row before Baylor won the conference title the year before that. You don't think that this is just an anomaly of a year? I'm saying that it is. Chances are, and there's a lot of experts out there that expect, and especially in view of the fact of what that schedule looks like for both of them, I would say that they have a pretty good shot at it, and they definitely, their road to the CFP and certainly for the conference championship game is a lot less rugged than you would have expected it to be. Oklahoma has 2 major road games. The first one being obviously opening up the conference at Cincinnati. We don't know what Cincinnati is going to look like with Luke Fickell gone from the program now. So you're catching that at a good time. The last one would definitely be a little bit tougher. The second to last game of conference is at BYU in Provo, Utah. Tough place to play against a team that everybody expects should be among the favorites to move on and play for that conference championship in their first season. I'm not sure that I agree with that necessarily. I do think that BYU is a great program. I think that your first season coming into the league, that's a lot to ask. You also have UCF, which Oklahoma does play them, but it will be in Norman, coming off of a bye week as well after the Texas game. So they get them at home and, off of a bye. That's a good opportunity there to win. I think that myself, I've said that 8-9 wins for a team this young is good, but I could definitely see Oklahoma backdooring 10 wins and finding a way to get into that conference championship game. We'll see what happens. We'll kind of see how that goes. Now, who does this deal benefit the most? I would say that, there's definitely some call to say, that it benefits Oklahoma and Texas, but I definitely don't think that you can overstate how important this was for the Legacy 8 and for the Big 12 itself to get this out of the way. They do get that money to repay the Whiny 8. Okay. That money's going to get there. You get to remain whole on your end of that. And so your investment to save the conference, which you needed to do that. I mean, I'm not saying anything. I agree that needed to happen. You needed to get those 4 teams into the conference immediately in order to secure a better television contract when it was time to renew. So that was important. That you do get those earnings. They're going to be forfeited from their future earnings, 2023 earnings from the Big 12 as well. Now, the big thing for me is now that this is out of the way, Yormark can turn his attention to saving the league from what would be G5 status. And I know that nobody wants to hear this, least of all everybody over there at Okie Light. But the truth is this: who among the rest of these teams, who is going to carry that mantle? You know, is if it's Oklahoma State that's left to carry the mantle for the Big 12, they've won one conference title in the last 20 years. One. You know, and not only that, but you've got a coach who has managed to lose the better part of his entire team from a year ago that was in line to get into the CFP, and you've got a transfer quarterback that hasn't worked out in places like Texas Tech, and that's who you're hanging your hopes on, you know. Mm. And so Baylor or BYU or whatever, if these are the flag bearers, these are all teams that were already in Group of 5. Even if it's UCF, these are all teams that were Group of 5 conference members until this season when they're going to come into the Big 12. So what is important now is that you finish off the Pac-12, which apparently is what Yormark is trying to do. And this is what I said last night on the live show, was that I felt like this was what Brett Yormark is probably better than what the Big 12 could have even hoped for. I said deserved. That might have been a little harsh. Let's say hoped for, okay? Because in view of the fact of the people that have run this conference up until now, this guy is on another level of brains. And he knows that getting that deal done was so very important, because now you've got George Kliavkoff of the Pac-12 is trying to invade Big 12 country, going to get SMU. He's already visited SMU about the possibility of them joining the Pac-12 conference. Obviously, they're also talking to San Diego State, which I think is funny in view of the fact that SDSU has wanted so badly to be a part of the Pac-12 for a long time, and they've never given them any attention whatsoever. What I would tell you is this is where the Big 12 is in a position of power right now. Because if Yormark goes to SMU and says, look, sure, you could go and join the Pac-12, but you could also join the Big 12 right now, and we're in a much better position to live moving forward. It could be 4 or 5 years down the line. It could be 7 years down the line. It could be 10 years down the line. But the other shoe will eventually drop, and the Big Ten will scoop up Oregon, Washington. If they were to get Notre Dame, they're probably going to get Stanford and Cal as well. And now what do you have left? So SMU going to the Pac-12, it's not a long-term solution. If they were to become a member of the Big 12, they preserve their rivalry with TCU. They preserve, and throughout, some of these Texas schools that are right nearby, that's a big deal for them. San Diego State could also come into a situation that, that not only that definitely helps the Big 12, because you do get a recruiting footprint in California, which would be big. And also, why would they choose the Pac-12 over the Big 12 when, in fact, as I said, that other shoe is going to drop at some point? The main thing that needs to happen here, though, those two schools, I think, are fairly important. The ones that are the most important, and it's starting to seem like, from everything that you're hearing from a lot of these, even these reporters that have typically been very pro Pac-12, is you're starting to hear that there are a lot of cracks in the facade over there in the Pac-12, and that there was a lot of promises made about, if you stay, our television deal is going to be here, blah, 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 blah. And apparently it's not looking that way. Here we are 7 months away from the season starting, and they don't even have a deal with the Pac-12. They don't have a deal. So why is that? I believe, and Kuz, this is something that I heard from Kuz as well, and I've been finding it a lot all over YouTube, and throughout a lot of newspapers that I keep up with, is that you have Arizona State is definitely ready to jump ship. I think that Arizona would be willing to do that as well, which is definitely good for the Pac-12 in terms of basketball, as we talked about last night. But so those two, definitely you need to get them. They're already members of the Pac-12. You could go ahead and cut the legs out from underneath this conference right now with just those two. If you are somehow able to do that, then you can also grab Utah, because Utah is the one out of these conferences that out of that conference that seems to be listening to what Klyavkov has to say, and I guess kind of, well, they seem to be not as open to the opportunity of going to the Big 12 yet. If you chop two more legs out from underneath it, they're going to see the writing on the wall there too. This would also help the Big 12 in the fact that you would now be able to preserve the Holy War, Utah versus BYU. That's a big rivalry. No matter what, that's a big rivalry. Now, the biggest one, and this is just due to circumstance, really, because obviously the program up until this point hasn't been anything. But Colorado is, to me, should be the number one. It should be the number one priority for Brett Yormark because of Coach Prime and because of the recruiting that he's doing, because of the fact that he can hold down recruiting in the state of Texas. This is a guy that went a year ago at Jackson State. He got the number one overall recruit in the country to flip from Florida State and go to his school. He was also in the running to go to Georgia as well. He went to Jackson State. He is now, that's of course Travis Hunter. He is now with Coach Prime in Colorado. He, in his first recruiting season, which he kind of spent half the time at JSU and half the time at Colorado, he ended up with the number 21 overall class. When you add in your transfer portal rankings as well, they were 5th in the transfer portal rankings. So a top 21 class. Last year, they were 59th in the country. If you don't see the writing on the wall there, you're not looking. But this is a program that, particularly as long as Coach Prime is there, could carry the mantle for the Big 12. Because chances are, Christian from Lone Star thinks that, and I'm not sure that I'm going to go this far, but he believes that Colorado could be a member or somebody that qualifies for the CFP in the first year of it in 2024, now that there's 12 teams. It's a possibility. They do have a heck of a team. When you start looking at their skill positions and with what he's adding in recruiting, the Pac-12 already wasn't that good. And you'll have USC and UCLA will have left to go to the Big Ten that year. So it's very possible that something like that could happen. I feel like they're probably anywhere from 7 to 9 wins in his first season. This is an important piece. So if you go and get Utah, Colorado, the Arizona schools for sure, then you win the war. And you needed to be able to free Yormark up to go do these things, to do that. And make no mistake, he has no allegiances to anybody in any other conference. He's not a member. He's never been a commissioner before, so he comes at it from another angle too. This is a huge time for the Big 12 for the sake of being relevant. And I just don't. This is how you can remain relevant after OU and Texas leave, is by going and making this happen. Had this deal to send Oklahoma and Texas on after the 2023 season not come to fruition, then he's got his iron in too many fires, and he's probably not as focused on the most important thing for the Big 12 moving forward. And what I feel like is, because of the fact that he's not bound by this pettiness that the rest of the Legacy 8 has against Oklahoma and Texas for leaving. And I'm not even saying that you guys don't have a reason to be upset. What you really should have been upset about is Bob Bowlesby and the way that they continued to drop the ball coming into now. Um, it took until Oklahoma and Texas finally did leave in order for anybody to do anything about it and bring in more schools. When you could have done that years ago and made this a whole Big 12 conference instead of just a 10 conference, a conference of 10 teams. It weakened them year after year. And had you have had a guy like Yormark in here before, chances are none of this happens. But it did. And now you have to hope that he takes and does what is right for the conference's future. I feel like that's the best thing that you could possibly have happen. And it appears that that's definitely where his mind is. So rather than being petty about this, you might want to think Okie Light and whoever else is complaining about all this stuff and talking all this smack. You might want to think about the fact that, okay, we get a little bit of money for them leaving. They're leaving a year early. We don't have to put up with it anymore. We don't have to take our yearly butt kicking anymore, Okie Light. So, that's good. And we get paid. On top of that, chances are this guy is going to go and be focused on what's really important, which I know Cody even said this, that he believes that was the place that Yormark's headed to. I think that he's right on that. And I think that it better be. You got to go get Colorado. Go get them. They're a former member of the Big 12. And I don't care how much they all love the idea of the Pac-12. The Pac-12 is dying. It will not take any more time. When you can't even get into the 30 million per season number, this is why the Pac-12 hasn't signed a deal yet. You can't even get into that number yet. If you can't even do that, then why in the world would any of these teams stay? It's never going to happen. The Big 12 is already in that 32 million, but upwards of 40 something million per year is what it's going to amount to. If they add these new schools, that number will definitely go up because they haven't even entered the year to when it's going to change out, which is 2025. The Pac-12 is about to go into the 24 season without a deal anymore. After this year, they have no deal. This is something to think about. Be glad that you got the guy that you got. Be glad that he was able to sift through all the stupidity and find a way to make this happen. That's what is going to possibly save the Big 12 from itself. Folks, hope that you enjoyed the video. Make sure you hit the like and subscribe button if you already haven't become a subscriber. We will see you in the future.